Welcome to tonight's class, and tonight we are studying Parashat Yitro, and we are studying the holy words of Rav Shimshon Pincus. And tonight we're going to speak about two different aspects, both relating to the idea of the Jewish people coming in this week's Torah portion to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai. So I want to share a verse with you. This is the beginning of chapter 19, verse 1. B'chodesh hashelishi, on the third month, that would be the month of Sivan, letzet b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, when the Jewish people left from Egypt. Bayom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai, on this day, they arrived at the desert of Sinai. You see this word over here, Rashi says, Bayom hazeh, on this day. Could have just said Bayom ahu, on that day. Why does it say on this day? Asks Rashi. So Rashi gives a very important answer. Rashi says that the Torah is hinting to us that the words of Torah should be new and fresh, as if they were given that very day. Every day you come to learning Torah, every time you open up a book, every time you come to a class, you should be eager and excited as if it's something brand new. It's a human condition that we're always excited for something new, and then we get bored from old things. When it comes to Torah, we have to renew it on a daily basis every single time we come to Bayom Hazeh, on this day, not on that day, Bayom Ahu. Rav Pincus has a powerful question, and he says, why is the hint to renewing and feeling this inspiration and this vigor to learn Torah being hinted to right now? The Jewish people are arriving to the Sinai desert. They have barely even got to Mount Sinai. Why would this hint be before they receive the Torah? Let this hint be alluded to while they are or after they get the Torah, not in the preparation to receive the Torah. Sir Pincus has a powerful concept. He says, we see from this, it's not by chance, that the simple fact that the Jewish people arrived at the Sinai desert, upcoming to Mount Sinai, they gained something special. And that it was actually that moment was already the beginning of the receiving of the Torah. Before all the thunder and lightning and clouds and shofar blasts, right now, right here, when they are already approaching the Sinai desert, approaching Mount Sinai, that's already the beginning of the receiving of the Torah. And that is, at the beginning, a perfect time to allude to this idea of newness and freshness when it comes to learning Torah. So with this explanation, we're still not done. With this explanation, Rav Pincus says we can answer one of the most famous questions, and those of you in the crowd who have joined us for our intense, in-depth study of the Haggadah that we did a year and a half ago, almost coming to 2 years, will remember this question. This is one of the most basic and fundamental questions on our Haggadah. One of the great songs we sing is called Dayenu. It would have been enough. And the most puzzling, the most bothersome line in the Song of Dayenu is, if Hashem would have brought us to Mount Sinai and not given us the Torah, Dayenu, that would have been enough. Would have been enough? Wasn't the whole point of the Jewish people coming to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah? What point would there be for the Jewish people to come to Mount Sinai and not get the Torah? I'm sorry. Okay, even though the whole point of getting the people out of Egypt was to give them the Torah to come to the land of Israel, but there's still a value in leaving Egypt even without the Torah. There's still a value of receiving the Torah even without going to the land of Israel. But what value is there to coming to Mount Sinai and not getting the Torah? So we've given a couple answers to this. In light of tonight's insight, Rav Pincus wants to give us a new answer. You see, coming to Mount Sinai wasn't a preparation. This is different than what we've learned before. Coming to Mount Sinai was not a preparation to receive the Torah. That was actually the beginning of receiving the Torah. But how so? So he explains with a mashal, with an anecdote. Imagine the following. A very famous big tzaddik comes to town. And the rabbi is standing in front of tens of thousands of Jews who came to hear him deliver a speech. There's a tremendous amount of awe and pressure in the room. Everyone's scared to approach him. And then this tzaddik calls a person in the crowd. Says, "You, come here." The individual gets up, comes close, overcome with emotion, obviously. Now this tzaddik greets this individual not just with a handshake, but with a hug and a kiss. And then he tells him, after the event, I want you to come to where I'm staying. Come over. We'll have a sit down. A miracle. That person, if that was you, who's picked out of tens of thousands of people, you would think that this is just an utter miracle. That's exactly, Rav Pincus says, how the Jewish people felt when they came to Mount Sinai. They felt like Hashem brought them close to him. That's what happened at Mount Sinai. Hashem brought the Jewish people close to him. By bringing the Jewish people close to him, that was just as a testification of how intertwined and connected the Jewish people are in every aspect of their life to God. And that's enough of a reason to be grateful for to Hashem. Just coming close to Mount Sinai. That's the beginning of the receiving of the Torah. It's the testimony that Hashem is so connected to the Jewish people. Out of all the nations, all the people, he told us, come close. Now, however, we know that without the Torah and mitzvot, our relationship and love for Hashem is insignificant, but it was preceded by a feeling of love and closeness that Hashem had for us. And that's what helped us jump into accepting the Torah. So that's one aspect. Now let's, again in chapter 17, fast forward to the 17th verse. Chapter 19, verse 17. Look at this. Vayotze Moshe et ha'am likrat ha'elokim min ha'machaneh vayityatzvu b'tachtit ha'har. Very famous verse. Moses brought the Jewish people out towards God from the camp, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. Stood at the bottom of the mountain. There's a very famous Rashi on this. And Rashi told us, based on the Talmud and Masechet Shabbat, page 88a, that from this verse, B'tachtit ha'har, we learn that Hashem raised Mount Sinai, lifted it on top of the Jewish people, and said, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, oops, gonna let go. V'sham tiyeh kvuratchem, and you're gonna be buried over here. Wow. If you don't accept the Torah, kaput, kaddish, finished. Well, in truth this is one of the most confusing teachings from our sages in our entire Talmud. What does that mean? That Hashem is threatening the Jewish people to accept the Torah? Didn't the Jewish people say and receive the Torah by saying, they proclaimed, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will listen. So why is Hashem forcing them now to accept it? Answers Rav Pincus. Because if the accepting of the Torah would have been only 100% out of the Jewish people's will, no questions, even though that's a very high and lofty level, there's still something lacking. There's one aspect that's lacking. You know what that is? That is that one day, rather like this, when someone accepts something willingly, today they want it and they agree to it, but one day they may change their mind and they may not want it anymore. When the Jewish people proclaimed Naaseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will listen, that was good enough to cause us to fulfill the Torah, but that wasn't good enough to have the Torah rooted in us in a way that we can never separate ourselves from it. We can't get rid of it. We can't get a refund on it. That's why Hashem had to force us to accept the Torah. He suspends the mountain on top of us Because once we're forced into something, there's no turning back. You need to fulfill the Torah, whether you like it or not. The Maharal explains it in a way which is not too pretty, but it's a fact. He says that the intention, and those of us who were here a couple years ago when I brought Rabbi Mansur to our synagogue to speak, he said this point. And many people had a hard time understanding what it means, but I'll re-explain. That Hashem's intention with this event of forcing the Jewish people to accept the Torah is kind of like the unfortunate event of when a man forces a woman to be with her, then he has no choice but to keep her as a wife. You're stuck with her now. So now the Jewish people and Hashem were kind of forced together. That's what Hashem wanted. So this way, there's no turning back. You can't just send it away. They're committed to one another. Now, the Talmud also tells us that even though the Jewish people were forced to receiving the Torah now, years later, by the time of Achashverosh, during the Purim miracle, they re-accepted the Torah out of love. So Pincus says it comes out like this. First, the Jewish people accepted it blindly, Naaseh v'nishma. Okay, that's good. It's not good enough. They didn't know what they were getting into. Then Hashem forced them to accept it so they can never get a refund. Then many generations later, the Jewish people re-accepted the Torah out of love because now they understood without fulfilling the Torah, life is incomplete. Without living a life with Hashem, there's no meaning. So this is a very, very important concept. So a blessing to us all is that may Hashem help us our entire lives, that we will love Him, that we will understand the love that He has for us as He brought us close to Mount Sinai and gave us the Torah. It should be a mutual love. We should first understand that Hashem loves us. We should love Him back. And that love should inspire us to fulfill, to learn, to do, and to encourage others always, and to instill this into our children and grandchildren, that they will be lifelong lovers and learners of Torah, lifelong learners and lovers of Hashem and His mitzvot. And that will be something which will be a promise to hopefully have our children continue in the ways of Torah and mitzvot, and always, always very connected to one's community and family, and of course to our Torah.